Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bartow. I have a question. I just want to start out by saying that the proposal before us, HR 7024, seems to be a slight improvement to the extent that it's based on numbers of children instead of the flat phase-in rate for one child. Under current law, I just want to be clear about what we're talking about. Under current law, a taxpayer who, say, had any numbers of children making $7.25 an hour, in order to get the maximum refundable credit under present law, they'd have to work 70 hours a week to do it. Am I sort of hitting the mark there?
Yep, Ms. Moore, yes. If you're assuming that taxpayers basically a minimum wage earner working 50 weeks a year, you'd have to work 70 hours a week under the example that you're positing.
Okay, thank you. Now, under this proposal, where we multiply it by numbers of children, that would be so much more a greater improvement, but the taxpayer would have to work. But if we had the same phase-in rate of 15%, and the person had 2 children, how many hours would they have to work in order to be able to get the maximum credit?
Ms. Moore, under present law, as you noted, the phase-in rate is 15%. Under the proposal, the phase-in rate is essentially multiplied by the number of children. So the phase-in rate in your example is increased to 30%.
Right.
And under the same facts that you'd posited before, you'd have to work a little bit over 40 hours per week in order to achieve the maximum amount of refundable credit. Also note that under the legislation, the maximum amount of refundable credit is also increased by the legislation.
Okay, so the statutory phase-in rate of 15%, is that, I don't understand. Would the phase-in rate have to be changed in order for someone making $7.25 an hour who worked 42 hours a week, they'd get the maximum credit at the 15% rate?
The way the statute works, Ms. Moore, is the 15% rate is multiplied by the number of children.
Okay,
so that took it from 15 to 30%, and that's what produced your calculation in your example.
Okay.
42 hours per week of work would get you the maximum refundable credit under this legislation.
Okay, so if that person only had 1 child under this new proposal, they still would not be able to get the maximum by working 42 hours a week. They'd still have to work 70 hours?
They'd have to work substantially more than 40 hours per week, yes.
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. So people have argued that people don't make $7.25 an hour, although we do know they do. We talk a lot about the poverty in rural areas and working at the truck stop and the inability of the employer to provide those extra benefits. So let's just say they were making $10 an hour. How many hours under this proposal would a taxpayer have to work in order to be allowed the maximum refundable credit?
If we go back to your example of 2 children,
yeah.
So a 30% phase-in, the taxpayer would have to work approximately 30 hours per week to achieve the maximum refundable credit.
Okay, all right. So, with the same phase-in rate of 15%.
15% multiplied by 2 for the the 2 children.
So, if you have 1 child at $10 an hour, how many hours would you have to work?
Approximately 50 hours.
50 hours.
50 hours per week, yes.
Okay, thank you. So, just to make it clear, the phase-out for this program for the single parent is $200,000 of income, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so can you just tell me the range of taxpayers, I mean earnings, not taxpayers, they're all working. under these examples, but a mom with 2 kids, what is the, what's the minimum? What is the range of taxpayers and earnings, you know, bottom to top, that they, at 15%, would they receive the maximum credit? Okay, Bert.
Ms. Moore, as you noted, any taxpayer with, as long as you have earned income up to $200,000, you can achieve the maximum. The point
But
that
you wouldn't
making,
have to be working 70 hours a week.
not if you were earning substantially above, $50,000.
Right. I mean, because you could be a consultant or something and work 1 hour a month and still get the full credit.
If
Yeah.
if you were paid a good amount for that 1 hour, yes, ma'am.
Right. All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. I needed to ask these questions, and I yield back. I just want to thank the chairman and this committee for this markup, but I do have to say that I think that marking these bills up today is a missed opportunity on both the individual and the corporate side. You've heard many of my colleagues talk today about the $600 billion plus that we are going to lock in for corporations, but yet leave millions of children languishing in poverty. You know, I've heard many people say that that the improvements in the child tax credit is something that we ought to just be happy with, because it will, in fact, provide at least 400,000 kids, it will move them out of poverty. But it's unacceptable to me that we are leaving millions more in poverty. I'm so proud that what we did with the child tax credit, the refundability portion, lifted 40% of children in this country out of poverty. You know, the Republicans' notion that somehow there's a moral hazard in providing a refundable tax credit is unsubstantiated by people who do research. This is not a disincentive to work. And if you heard the dialogue that I had with the Joint Committee on Taxation, that no matter how hard a woman works, say she works, she's got 2 kids, no matter how hard she works, she'd have to work 70 hours a week under current law and over 40 hours a week in order to access the maximum credit. And so this is not supposed to be a work program. It's supposed to recognize the expensive cost of raising kids and wanting them to have the proper development, health and education and employment. That is what is a fact. It's a fact that children are better off with some support. And speaking of a work program that incentivizes work, the Earned Income Tax Credit, we didn't do a thing to improve it. We tax single people into poverty. We discriminate against younger people and older people, and we have done nothing to fix that. And you know, I just want to talk a little bit about the business portions of this bill. Take, for example, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which was passed in 2017. And it was rushed, and so there were a lot of mistakes made. Representative Ferguson and I are working on a major flaw. The downward attribution flaw wasn't addressed in this bill. Another unintended consequence to the TCGA hurts municipal bond insurance and reinsurance, which helps defray the risk of investing and helping borrowing costs, keeping them low. And I'm working with Representative Adrian Smith to fix this. You know, they say, you know, there are other things, like I appreciate the improvements that have been made to the low-income housing tax credit, but it doesn't help tribal communities at all. And of course, we have a trust obligation with them that we are not meeting. You know, this doesn't have to be a take it or leave it proposition, Mr. Chairman, and I'm talking to the chairman of the full committee. This committee print that we're considering today is not there yet. I definitely want to work with you to come up with something better. You know, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, y'all help me. You can get what you need. And so let's just get there. And I yield back. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I absolutely support Ms. Del Benny's amendment. I'm speaking on behalf of mothers, grandmothers, and for myself as a great-grandmother, who says that it is totally unfair and it's sort of immoral to leave out the neediest, poorest children from being able to benefit from living in the richest country in the world and to be poor. You know, this act, even with the amended changes, discriminates against women who, for many reasons, do not work. Did you know that 20% of the kids in this country are disabled? What if a mom has to stay home because her kids are disabled? She will not benefit from these provisions. What about that grandmother who rescues her grandchildren from an untenable situation? Maybe their daughter or their son is on drugs or in prison. That grandma won't get a dime with these new provisions. And it's not fully refundable. So while we are providing some benefit to some families, I would say that at least 2 million kids, and probably millions more, will be left out. You know, Ms. Sewell has spoken about her district, and I know that she and Ms. Miller are from states, West Virginia and from Alabama, where the child poverty rate is 23%. So I think that there'll be more children from these districts and these areas who will not get any money. It excludes, again, the poorest people. Foster parents. I mean, if your child ends up in a foster home because you can't take care of them for whatever reason, we will provide money to those foster parents, the CTC to them, thank God. But you have to lose your kids in order for your children to get the benefit. That's just unconscionable. And since 85% of child removals are due to poverty, not because of any other sort of abuse, poverty, poverty is the main reason that they are taken from their mothers. We are incentivizing child removals so that the kids can eat. You know, and the other problem with this bill is that it locks in this limited child tax credit for 3 years, making this compromise agreement go on for longer than it should. We should change it today, immediately. And of course, as I mentioned, it locks in $600 billion of permanent tax cuts for corporations. 55% of these corporations which pay no taxes at all, just like the women and grandmothers who are going to be denied the child tax credit, who have no tax liability, except that they won't get the benefit of our tax code. I know that Democrats and Republicans have all talked about how much they care about children, how much they love children, how much they want to raise up a healthy workforce. All of us care about children. Well, now it's time to prove that, y'all. Here we are with this amendment before us, which gives us an opportunity to demonstrate that even if your parent is poor, baby, we are not going to let you starve. And I would yield back the balance of my time. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And let me just thank the gentlelady for offering this amendment. You know, this amendment says that every family should be eligible for the refundable tax credit. I just want to make a brief point, and I won't consume my entire amount of time, but just think about it. A stay-at-home mom, someone who's just had those twins and decided that she needs to stay at home, and her husband is a doctor making $100,000 a year, as Dorothy Brown, one of our witnesses at when we had Miss we had our group that came together under the auspices when we were in the majority to talk about inequities. Dorothy Brown was an author that talked about how the tax code was geared to away from stay-home moms and really provided more opportunity for men who were the breadwinners than not. And here's a good example. So you got the mom. Her husband makes $100,000 a year. She's a stay-at-home mom with her twins. And they would get the child tax credit. Unlike the grandma who's rescuing her twin children from maybe a drug-infested home, who won't get anything. Or the grandmother that is taking care of the kids because the father is incarcerated, or because the twins are disabled. That mom who stays at home to take care of the disabled twins will not get a thing. Whereas, you know, a mom who stays at home with perfectly healthy and not needy necessarily kids, but who's married to a doctor or someone who works on Wall Street will get the benefit. And so I think that this amendment really speaks to the disparity in how we treat kids who all deserve to be fed and clothed and sheltered and loved. And we're saying that because the parents themselves don't have the capacity to earn enough money to have tax liability, we will take it out on the children. And so Mr. Chairman, I'm yielding back half my time. I hope that you're recognizing how wonderful I'm being. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to appreciate Ms. Sewell for offering this amendment. You know, certainly, as we all experience, you don't feed your kids or pay your rent on an annual basis. You know, it's very nice to get that check if you have some refundability. Most of us pay taxes and we find ourselves owing. But if you're poor, you're really tickled to death to get the earned income tax credit or get that you've worked and you get, you know, your $400 refund. But actually, kids eat cereal on a daily basis. They pay rent on a monthly basis. And so this is just a common sense. People get paid, quite frankly, on either a monthly or 2-week basis. Nobody is asked to defer all of their expenses for once a year. So this amendment just keeps in step with the way people actually live. And if you're poor, you're more in need of a monthly stipend than anyone else. And so I agree with her. I hope that we'll all just vote aye on this common sense measure. I also want to point out that her amendment doesn't necessarily say that we have to do it on former law or under the provisions of the AARP. That she's doing it on the bill that is before us, saying we ought to provide that benefit on a monthly basis. And so there's no increase in cost or anything for this amendment, and I'm grateful to her for offering it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple amendment, and it would provide for, instead of the 15% phase-in rate, it would change it to 40% phase-in rate. There's been a lot of discussion about the importance of the child tax credit and the numbers of children who are relieved from poverty because of it. But I came up with an example that you all may recall. with our joint committee on taxation that that really challenges our notion somehow that people can actually work their way kind of out of poverty without any support. I don't agree with the notion that the child tax credit should be used as a work program. The whole idea of the child tax credit is a supplement that recognizes the expense of raising children. It recognizes that even if you're a mom, a stay-home mom, making $399,000 a year, that child tax credit, which you will get, the full child tax credit if you are married and you're making $399,000 a year, it will be helpful to get your kids the Boy Scout uniform that they know, big feet, outgrow their shoes 2-3 times a year, being able to meet the needs that your income may not allow you to do it. But in order for a single woman, say she's in a rural area, because I know that's really important to you all, you know, working in the grocery store for $7.20 an hour, we need to have that phase-in rate be 40% in order for her to get the full tax credit. After we pass this bill, if she were to work her behind off 20 hours a week, which under our TANF legislation is all we expect any single mom to do, it is unfair and unreasonable to ask a mom with kids under the age of 5 to work 40, 45 hours a week in order to be able to access this credit. So if a mom is working 20 hours a week, has 2 children under the age of 6, this bill would say, let's have a phase-in rate of 40% so that she will be able to access the child tax credit, the same as the stay-home mom with her twins who makes $200,000 a year, or the married woman she and her husband both make $400,000 will get the full credit. Let's create that equity by doing it. And this is a compromise amendment for me because I agree with Ms. Del Benny. We ought to have a fully refundable tax credit and not associate this with work. There are no 5-year-olds who get jobs. We should not commute the responsibility of paying the mortgage or paying the rent or buying food or paying the car note on kids. And so this is a compromise amendment that I'm offering to say, yeah, let's make her, you know, we don't want any welfare queens, so we're going to make her work, but my God, we should not be forcing her to work more than 40 hours a week. And this amendment will enable her to access the credit with working 20 hours a week, which is the only thing we expect out of a poor woman. And so I would ask my colleagues to offer this. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this amendment? All right. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have heard several of my colleagues talk about how this is a negotiated bill, and so we need to pass it and fight to live another day. So what I will do at this time, Mr. Chairman, is that I will withdraw this with the promise that you're going to work with me to ease up on the unfairness of this to poor children. And so with that, I would withdraw my amendment. Mr. Chairman, this amendment would add to H.R. 7024 a new section that modifies the low-income housing tax credit to include Indian areas as difficult development areas for purposes of certain buildings. And I would yield time to Mr. Kildee.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Our Native American communities, including those that I represent in Michigan, have some of the highest levels of need for quality, affordable housing in the entire country. Families in tribal communities are almost 5 times more likely to live in poor housing conditions when compared to the rest of the nation. Parts of our tax code that are meant to encourage economic development should recognize the unique challenges that these particular communities face. But right now, our tax code prevents tribal governments from taking full advantage of key tools to support economic development, like the housing tax credit. This means they're at a disadvantage relative to other communities. We need to ensure the sovereignty of tribes is honored and that the tax code provides parity for tribal governments and communities. So I'm proud to join my friend Representative Moore in offering this very simple, common sense amendment to help build more quality, affordable housing in Indian country. And I hope that going forward, Republicans and Democrats that share concern about this issue can come together to support our effort. And with that, I yield back to Ms. Moore.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kildee, for framing that important. It's important to have good housing in Indian country. And you know, we have obligations to our Native American family. They have rights under our Constitution. And I would say housing is one of the things that one way that we have tried to pay back our Native American friends. I've worked for years on the NAHASDA when I was on the Financial Services Committee, and now on this committee as well. I'm still concerned about Native American housing. I just want to thank Representative Susan Delbene for the hard work that she has supplied in order to increase the supply of affordable housing in our communities. I remember going up to northern Wisconsin for a hearing on housing, and I walked into one Native American woman's home. You could tell she had fixed it up for my visit. Very tidy, very neat, very well decorated with Indian artifacts and so on. And I was in the house for 5 minutes before I started wheezing, coughing, eyes swelling from the mold. And my chief of staff had to drag me out of her house after 5 minutes. Those are the kinds of conditions that are rampant among our colleagues. Now, I had said earlier that about 50% of folks who are in my state pay over 50% for the cost of housing. And somebody texted me with maybe a fact check, a political fact check on that. But what I will say is that the lower your income is, the more likely it is you're going to be paying 50, 60, 70% of your income on housing. If you rent, you're more than likely to be paying that. So expanding the low-income housing tax credit is critical. And not providing this benefit to our Native American friends, I think, is an abdication from our responsibilities to Native American tribes. And so I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that this is something that we won't overlook in further meetings of, the time has come for us to address this. And so I would withdraw this amendment at this time, but I'm hoping that I can withdraw it with the notion that we're going to revisit this.